everyone. How are all the Rhymos out there? You might remember me from last year. I'm China. I am the donation weekend coordinator this year, and I'm super excited because we have three amazing guests today. I'm probably more excited than they are, and I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with that. Like I said, my name is China. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. It is the second day of our double up donation weekend, and I hope that everyone's getting pumped for NaNoWriMo because it's happening tomorrow, or depending on your time zone, it might already have happened. And so I'm glad to be able to introduce these amazing authors. So first up, we have Bethany C. Morrow. Bethany C. Morrow is an indie best-selling author who writes for adult and young adult audiences in genres ranging from speculative literary to contemporary fantasy to historical. She's the author of novels A Song Below Water and Mim, which is an Audie, Ignite, and Locus finalist. She is editor and contributor to the young adult anthology Take the Mic, the 2020 ILA Social Justice in Literature Award winner, and her work has been chosen as Indies Introduced and Indie Next Picks and featured in the LA Times, Forbes, Bustle, BuzzFeed, and more. She's also included on USA Today's list of 100 Black novelists and fiction writers you should read. So, Bethany, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I'll just mention that my latest release is So Many Beginnings, a Little Women remix, which is part of the Remix Classics line from Fievel and Friends at Macmillan.
Next, I would like to introduce Angelina Lopez. Angelina has been writing professionally her entire life, first as a journalist for an acclaimed city newspaper, then as a freelance magazine writer, and now as a romance author. She writes sexy contemporary stories about strong women and the confident men lucky enough to fall in love with them. We love that. Her debut book, Lush Money, was named a top 10 romance debut of 2020 by ALA's book list. Lush Money and Hate Crush received rave reviews from Entertainment Weekly, NPR, and Booklist, and her first book in a new high-heat small-town Latinx series, After Hours on Milagro Street, will be available in July 2022. Angelina, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. And I'm so excited for you Nano people getting all hyped for tomorrow. I have, coming out this December, I have two anthologies. One is called 12 Naughty Days. It's taking the 12 days of Christmas and making it super dirty. So I am going to be doing the 12 Drummers Drumming, which was a stretch a little bit for me, but that's an exciting story to tackle. Then I'm also doing the Best Women's Erotica series, volume 7. I've got a short story in that too. So those are both coming out as possible Christmas gifts. And I just wanted to point out, and nod to Halloween, this is a heart, but it's actually like biologically correct. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, so it's like heart romance, but like it's a heart. So anyway, yeah, thanks for having me.
And last but not least, I just want to introduce Alexis Daria. She's an award-winning and best-selling author. She's also a lifelong New Yorker who writes stories celebrating the lives and loves of Latinx characters. Her 2020 release, You Had Me at Hola, was a national bestseller, New York Times Editor's Choice pick, and featured on several best of lists for the year. Her latest book, A Lot Like Adios, was released in September. And here's something pretty cool. She was actually a NaNoWriMo ML municipal liaison for many years. So like, she's got this down, guys. Once again, her book, A Lot Like Adios, is out right now. Alexis, do you want to, say anything or add anything to that?
Sure. Yeah, I was an ML. I've been doing NaNoWriMo, participating in some ways since 2004. So it's been a long time, and I really credit Nano with keeping me writing during all of the years when it was very difficult, and connecting me with other writers. And it's the reason why I'm published today. And like China said, my latest book is A Lot Like Adios, which came out last month.
Yeah, so I just have a question for all of you. What made you decide to become a writer?
What order do you want us to go in?
Yeah, did you want to call on us or?
Well, it's free for all, but Bethany, how about you, since you're the first one on my screen?
Okay. Well, I think that the question always sort of gives people the impression that it is a decision for every single person, or that you know, you just active. It's just like saying like, why did you write about? And then they list a bunch of themes that are in your work as though you like wrote a list of themes before you wrote the book. For me, I am a writer, so I have been writing ever since I was like 7 years old. And while that's not like useful information in terms of like publication, because there's a difference between being a writer and an author, there's a difference between writing and writing for publication, writing for the public. So I wasn't right. That didn't mean that I was going to be an author, but there was no point at which I was like, I should start writing. It just naturally, it's just how I interacted with my imagination, with my family. I would write things for my siblings to either read or to act out. We would act out a lot of stuff. So I don't have any memory of not being a writer. I knew that I wanted to be an author probably in junior high, and I really only credit it to that late, because in junior high I had an ELA teacher who found out that I did write, and also that I took seriously the fact that she was a professional writer. She wrote episodes for, among other things, I'm sure, but she wrote episodes for Star Trek Voyager, which my family was very faithfully watching at the time. And so she started a writing club for me after school. And she is the person who sort of taught me that there is an industry component to this. There's a way to approach this. There are people that you have to approach to represent your work. She taught me how to write a query letter. And at the time, all of this was like snail mail and everything. So she taught me how to properly fold the query letter and put it in the envelope the correct way, all of which was totally moot by the time I started querying in earnest, because that was totally different. Obviously, I went to junior high in like the mid to early 90s. So all of it was useless except for the understanding that there's an industry and there's a business component. It's where your passion and your writing intersects with the market, which is important to know if you want to write for publication.
What about you, Alexis?
I was kind of similar. It was just always something I did. And I can remember when I first started writing longer form stuff, just like on my own for fun. And that was in middle school. And then I found fanfic, and that provided me with a community. I was on this mailing list for I'm not going to say what it was, but there was like a fanfic mailing list, and I was like, what is that? And that was really, when I first started putting my work out there, receiving feedback, giving feedback to other people, talking about writing with folks. My best friend in middle school also would write. So we'd like be on the phone with each other while like working on our vampire stories, of course. But it was just a hobby because my focus was visual arts, and that's what I majored in. It's what I did outside of school. It's, I majored in it in high school and in college. And it wasn't until I was 30, and I said, okay, let me try to treat this as more than a hobby. Let me try to give it a fair shot. And the only reason I think I was even still writing at that point was because of Nano, because I had been doing that all through my 20s, even when I was finishing school and working full time. And it really just kept me writing at least for 1 month out of the year, and connected me with other writers and a critique group, and all of those things that are so helpful. And then as for why I write just in general, now I am writing the stories that I wanted to read then that didn't exist, which I think probably all of us on this panel are doing.
Angelina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that the exact answer that Bethany had right away, which was like, you're a writer. I think there's this element of that people who are writing, who sustain writing, who can keep with it, that there's a compulsion to it. And to a certain extent, I've told people, like, if there's anything else that you're good at, like anything, do that, because this is hard. But that being said, there is a compulsion to do it. There is a compulsion to be a writer. And if you have that, then follow that as well. Like, follow that. I was in kindergarten. Our teacher asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up, and we were writing out little worksheets. And I wrote Arthur, and she called me up to her desk, and she was like, Arthur, and I'm super aging myself. I'm older than both these ladies, but there was a movie out with Dudley Moore about this drunk millionaire named Arthur. And she was like, "You want to be Dudley Moore?" And I was like, "No, I want to be a writer." And she said, "Author." And so she takes me to the board and showed me how to write author. I always knew I was a writer. I identified myself as someone that this made sense to, and it was a compulsion to do it. And I funneled that into journalism because I was also no fun Virgo realist who was like, I can't make any money writing, so I will be a newspaper journalist. And then about my mid-20s, I had always been a lifelong romance reader, or a lifelong reader, but very passionate about romance centering women's stories, a women-focused industry, and women's pleasures and intentions. And so very much any kind of, very much embraced it as a proud genre that I wanted to make an impact in. And so kind of directed all my energies towards that. But yeah, again, pivoting from being a writer to an author is a whole other different thing. But I think there's a compulsion about writing. Why do you write? It's like, I can't help it, which sucks sometimes. Don't you wish you could?
That's a really interesting point, and I do agree. Even before I could spell really well, I also, would write things that I try to read now and I have no idea what they say, but that's okay. And I was just thinking while you all were talking, like Alexis pointed out, like you write the stories you wish you would have had, earlier. And so kind of linking that to this question, do you write for a specific audience or do you write more for yourself? And how do you like juxtapose those two things?
I think that's an interesting question because I just was on another panel a couple of hours ago, and I was talking about the fact that as a kid, I didn't wait for someone else to give me what I needed, which again, I was writing the entire time. So if I loved something and I didn't see myself in it, I don't remember having this sense of like, this isn't fair, or this angst, or this lack of security or something. I had the power to write, so I would write the stories that I wanted at the time even. So I don't feel like my writing now is sort of like writing back to that. I do feel like we're increasing, as we increase representation, not just presence, but representation, which means like by us, for us approach to it, rather than simply like peppering different stories with non-white characters. As we do that, we can increase in specificity. And I think that is something that's very edifying and empowering, so that everyone doesn't have to be satisfied with the exact same type of representation. I'm not writing, I don't desire to be the only Black woman that young Black girls have to read. I'm glad that I'm not the only one. I do hope that for someone, I am exactly what they wanted and are looking for, but I don't try to be that for everybody. And I don't think that's fair either to me or to the audience to make us subsist on scraps when other people have always had excess. So I specifically am always unapologetically writing to and about Black girls, but just like we were all forced to ingest a bunch of heteronormative, like cis white, dominated narratives, everybody can read it. Obviously, if it's the language that you can read it. Now, whether or not you want to read stuff, I mean, deprogram yourself and deal with that on your own time. But I am writing to Black girls and for everyone. I have a literacy when it comes to things that do not represent me because I've had to. And I like to point out to people that when you don't know how to read something that doesn't center yourself, when you don't know how to connect to characters that don't share your lived experience, that's a cultural incompetency. That's a form of illiteracy. Just as it would have been, we would have failed out of school if we couldn't do it. If I couldn't talk about Holden Caulfield, I would have failed out of school, right? So I make it really, really clear that I don't need to be writing for the general public in order for the general public to be able to read, understand, enjoy, get something from my work.
That's a very fair point, and I completely agree. Yeah, because I think, I'm not sure about you ladies, but I know that if I wanted to read something by a person of color, I had to find it. It wasn't something that, teachers recommended. It wasn't something on the curriculum. It was something I had to go and search for, like in the library with the little cards myself. So.
And it was often not the kind of stories that I wanted to read at the time. Like, I wanted to read like an urban fantasy that had like a diverse cast or Latina leads or, things like that, or like mysteries or sci-fi or all of those things. And it was like the ones that my mom had on the shelf were like memoirs or like, cultural studies texts, history, things like that. And like I was, young, and I was like, this is not what I'm looking for. I'm glad we have it. But so yeah, I mean, Bethany's like nailed it. And I would say in answer to your question, kind of both, like the stuff that I was writing back then, like still making sure that I'm doing that in my work now. So it is a little bit for me, but also for people who are looking for our books. There are people who are happy to read them and who don't need to like unpack stuff in order to enjoy a story first. So we're writing for them.
I 100% am writing books for me. Romance is a specific genre, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the way I write books that appease my id, like with one, there's no unapologetically and hoping that other people have that same passion for them. But I grew up in a very large Mexican-American family in the Midwest. Our family has been there since early 1900s. But outside of this large family, I did not see myself represented in the community, on TV, and definitely not in the romance books that I was reading. And so I'm 48, so I grew up, I never even expected to see myself in the world and in what I was reading. And so it really did take other writers like, this is so dumb of me to assume that I can't be represented in my books. Why wouldn't other women like me? And so it really was this awakening of like, oh my God. So now it's just this assumption that the women I write about in my books, some way or another, are going to be a reflection of the community that I want to be seen. And Alexis and I are part of a group of writers who kind of identify as Latinx romance writers. And even within, there's not a ton of us, but even in the grouping of us, which isn't, it's not huge, we are not monolithic. There are so many different countries, cultures. I was raised, small town Kansas, other people are in LA, other people are in New York, other people, that this idea that because we're Latinx, we are not monolithic. Our experiences on it. And even if you are born one block away from each other in the Bronx, your situation is not monolithic, and trying to represent that diversity in our stories, which everyone assumed with this whole other cauldron of other stories, that of course those were not, but somehow, so anyway, just writing that this is not a monolithic experience being a person of color. Very important.
Yeah, that's a very important thing to note, because no two people's experience are the same. Even if you are, talking about two siblings, how they view the world is completely different. So how, like, we should be able to say, I'm going to write about how I view the world. And, kind of going back to Bethany's point, it's anyone should be able to pick up this book and say, hey, I can read this and I don't have to feel like I relate, because I don't have to relate to enjoy a story, So that's something, I'm kind of glad you brought that up. I'm actually really excited about that. And I just wanted to touch back on, the difference between being a writer and becoming an author. Like, how was that experience for you? And do you have any tips you want to share with, our viewers on like taking that jump into becoming a published author and writing for publication?
Yeah, I would definitely say that I consider, the 5+ years of dedicated approaching the journey of querying and getting a literary agent. I queried off and on starting in university. And then when I say in earnest, it was sort of from August of 2010 until 2015 when I got my first agent. in addition to writing, basically what I tell people is like, if you want to be an author, you can't just write. Sorry, that's not how it works. And so simultaneous to writing, there's the community, which for me at the time was the Query Tracker and the Absolute Right forums. Like, they were huge. We were talking about what we were doing. We were exchanging information about different agents, but we were also finding like-minded people who have the same goal, which is to break into traditional publishing. At least for the people that I was talking to, you want to break into traditional publishing. And for that means that you have to be familiar with the marketplace. You have to be familiar with agents, with editors, but also with what is current, what is being, just what's happening in the industry. You have to have an awareness of the industry. And so we were finding people who that was the way that they were going to be guiding their critiques and their criticism. And when we're looking for a CP partner, we're not looking for somebody to pat us on the back and tell us how great we are. We're looking for somebody who's also aware of industry standards and is going to be able to help us get our work in shape to actually put in front of literary agents, and also to find the appropriate literary agents. Because it does not make sense to be querying people who don't represent what you write. And if you don't know that, that means you haven't been doing enough research. And that doesn't mean you're going to be able to escape every pitfall by doing research. There's some things that you just don't know what you don't know, but there's very, very much a business side of this that you can't afford to sort of just write and then start doing research, because it's not that your writing needs to change or adjust to trends or something, but you certainly need to know that if your idea of a novel, of a let's say contemporary young adult novel, is a 200,000 word, missive, you kind of need to know that that's not realistic. Like, that's not something that you're going to want to try to put in front of somebody. They're not going to be interested in that. That's absolutely ridiculous. So there's that sort of thing that you need to literally know what the parameters are. Nobody's ever going to tell you like, hey, go out and follow every single rule, but there's a difference between taking risks with your work and just being a noob, just like not knowing what you're not supposed to do. So I would say that if you need to find a way to balance the two things, which is the understanding and research and ongoing sort of research into the industry, finding like-minded critique partners who have the similar goals with you so that they also are doing that work, so that their critiques are useful in growing you as a professional writer or toward professional writing. And so part of that is honestly just like getting accustomed to real critique, getting accustomed to the actual editorial process, because that's not going to stop. First of all, you're going to always have professionals who are engaged in that, and that does not mean do everything that somebody tells you to do, but it does mean be prepared that you are not writing for yourself, that this is not self-insert, this is not fan fiction. You are writing to a market that really exists, that really has industry standards.
What about you, Alexis? Do you have any tips for, becoming a published author and writing for publication?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bethany really covered a lot of it. Do your homework, have a buddy, because this industry is hard, and you want buddies who are kind of around the same level that you're in, who are as serious as you are, so that you can grow together. But the other thing that I'll add is that traditional publishing is a long game. It's been almost 6 years since I sent my first queries for a book that didn't sell. So it takes a lot of resilience and patience, or at least the ability to focus on something else while you're waiting, because there's a lot of waiting. And in the meantime, you also have to think about it like a business and train the people around you to see that this is your job, that you are running a business, because that can sometimes be just as difficult as dealing with all of the other nonsense of the publishing industry. And just remember, it's also not the only game in town. Like, we have all chosen this path for our own reasons. But I am a hybrid author. I know Angelina is also going in that direction as well. So just know what your options are, but it really also comes down to doing your research just across the board so that you know what you want and what is best for you.
I feel like there is a rush. Well, in at least in the romance genre, which is one I could speak to the most, there is a rush to publication. There's this idea that it has now. And I guess actually that's just a traditional way of when you're wanting people to acknowledge your work. I want it to happen today. So, but in the romance genre, you do have an option to go, I can go traditional, I can go self-publish, relatively easy. There is a lot of things in place to make publishing, self-publishing within romance very, very simpler. I do think there is an element of taking the time to build, to do everything that both Bethany and Alexis talked about, you know, building the skill, learning the industry, meeting, you know, critique partners, and really allowing yourself to build voice, giving yourself an opportunity to really build voice, really build skill. And in the process of waiting, you know, doing and working and also just waiting a lot of times, waiting for the query, waiting, you know, do I write the second book in this one because is it going to sell? Within that is the opportunity to learn those hard skills or those very concrete skills of, do I know how to add stuff to my website? Do I know how to put out a newsletter? Do I know whatever my genre is? Where is my audience and how do I speak to them? Taking the courses to learn to do that. There are these really hard skills about what Bethany said, which is this is a business too, and you have to be a business person in the midst of talent and, you know, finding your voice and all of that. Learning those skills along the way, it does help to kind of mediate the angst of waiting, because you're skill building the whole time, that it is a long game. As Alexis said, it is a journey. And just because you get the call doesn't mean you reach the top of the peak. It's just the first step. So learn those really difficult skills. And we all wish we had the budget that we could, you know, farm all of those tasks to somebody else, but it just does not happen anymore. And the sooner you can embrace that and realize it, the easier this journey is going to be.
And that I have so many questions I want to ask, but I know that would take hours. So going back to those resources and, you know, finding critique partners, things like that. Do you guys have any sites that you want to recommend so people can look them up, so people can find those resources? Because I know especially for our those who are in our Young Writers program, they might have never heard of these things before. So maybe giving them a little advice or one of your favorite sites that you like to use and do that research would really help them.
Okay, I'm gonna immediately, oh, do you have one?
NaNoWriMo.org.
I was like,
yeah, my first in-person critique group grew out of my local region from Nano. So we were all meeting every November, and then we started meeting throughout the rest of the year. We would take a break for November and December, and that group still meets virtually now, of course. But, you know, that's where you can find some of your first writing buddies if, you know, you're just starting out.
Yeah, I was going to say that very much like all of the advice that my 7th, 8th grade ELA teacher gave me, which the advice that she gave me itself did not end up being useful because industries change so quickly. And I obviously started junior high when we had dial-up. So there's a lot that happened very quickly that changed the way you did everyday things across the board, across industries. And likewise, if I told you what to use based on what I used in 2010, that would be ridiculous because I don't even know if people use it anymore. I have no idea what that community is like, what the culture of those places are like, if they even exist anymore. Now it seems like I see a lot of people on Twitter using #writing_community, and I am on Twitter all of the time, and I absolutely, you know, meet other writers and agents and editors, which for querying authors I would not suggest, honestly. But that's where I have all of my relationships now. And it really wasn't, I mean, I was on Twitter in 2010, but it wasn't for publishing. That's not where everybody was. People were still blogging. Like we were all in the comment section of Janet Reed and like Nathan Bransford's blogs, which I'm pretty sure neither of those exist anymore. So it's not so much like, okay, here's a particular place to go and do this. I more want people to understand the necessity of community and how important it is to find your writing community, to find your critique partners, and also to test those out, do test runs. Just finding another author is not enough to, or another writer, I should say, is not enough to say, oh, okay, now we're going to be CPs. I used to exchange, let's say, 5 to 10 pages with someone because you don't even know what you don't know. You have no idea how detrimental the wrong partnering can be, and how much that's going to impact your enthusiasm and your bandwidth to write. I remember getting it back from someone, and they'd actually just like edited my work. I didn't know this person from a can of paint, and they had just gone in like actually edited the work. And I realized, you think that's okay, I think that's horribly disrespectful. We're not compatible. I don't want you moving things around in mine. I make my comments in bubbles and make suggestions and stuff. And so it doesn't sound like a big deal, but we all know how big of a deal it is, because this is our work. This is for some of us, we understand this is our life's work. We want to find mutually respectful people. We want to find people who are fans of our work. If you're not a fan of each other's work, there's no point. If you don't like anything about somebody's work, your critiques are not horribly helpful. Also understanding, finding people who critique for craft, who critique for clarity, don't critique for style, don't critique for voice, that sort of thing. Like, it's important to have those people, but the way that you find them changes from generation to generation, and generations are very short with the internet. So I would say NaNoWriMo is the first thing that I think of, because I know that a lot of people, I mean, annually and throughout the year, are continuously using NaNoWriMo. And I know that people are currently using Twitter. I don't know if that will still be the case, but it's important to go where other writers are. Definitely go where other writers are. Even if you're involved in, say, DV Pit, there's a lot of pitch contests that crop up on Twitter, and a lot of those, again, communities sort of like begin around those or in concert with those. So it's I don't think it's horribly difficult, but it might take some trial and error, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to make a love match the first time you meet other writers.
In the romance world, right, it should be able to speak again, like today, and it might change tomorrow, but in the romance world, Angela James, she's an editor with Carina Press, and she's an independent editor now, but she actually has, I think it's called Fearless Writers, but if you just Angela James, as you would expect to spell it, she has a group of writers that you can sign up so much per month. And I found it to be a really great place. I was involved in Romance Writers for America, and that's what I used to always recommend people, but I don't recommend that anymore. So, Bethany, it is constantly changing. If you are going to join an online or group of writers, because I was researching a lot of them, the one thing I would recommend is make sure you can do month to month. If they require some kind of subscription fee that you're locked into, or some kind of annual payment, do not do that, because as Bethany said, like, listen to your gut as you're engaging with these writers. Give yourself an opportunity. Is this the community for me? Is it not? And if it is not, make sure that you have an easy out. So as you're looking at, if you're looking at online organizations to join, accountability groups, whatever, and there's a payment option, make sure that it's just month to month, that if you at most you'll use a 1 month of fees to that. But she's one I'm involved in right now, and it's been very positive.
I just wanted to respond because I hadn't even considered that people would be spending money at this stage. I will say that I made a decision and a commitment to myself and to my family that yes, this is my job, and yes, this is what I am focused on. But until I make money, I won't spend any money. So for anybody out there who also feels like, I don't want to be investing money in something that is not proven yet, or something that is not paying me money yet. I don't know what it's like out there today, but that's a decision that I made, and it is perfectly possible to go through everything before publication without spending money. I did not pay for any subscriptions. I didn't pay for any membership sites. I have nothing against people who did. I just want people to feel okay with the decision to say, I'm going to just do what's available to me. There are people for whom that is inaccessible. That does not mean you're not going to be able to find critique partners, or you're not going to be able to pursue publication. I didn't even pay for Query Tracker. The forum was free. I didn't pay for Publishers Marketplace. I just was like, I don't think that there should be a monetary sort of restriction on who can engage with this. And we know there always is, and that's why demographics look the way they look in publishing. But I would say, if you have that conviction, or if you have that issue in your life, there are ways to do this without spending money.
That's
I'm
a
gonna put
very
on,
good.
oh, sorry. Can I put on my municipal liaison hat for a second too? And just like, in terms of using the site, please make sure that you are signing up with your local region. I'm not sure where it is in the site anymore, but that's the place where you're going to be able to connect with the people who are in your area. And, you know, on top of that, there's other forums and stuff. And a lot of these places go off into like other discords and things like that. So even though, you know, everything is virtual right now, there's still many ways that you can meet and connect with other people. The biggest thing I think with finding critique partners and writing buddies and things like that is trust. So listen to your gut as well. And one other resource that I'll throw out there is Clubhouse. I've been going in some of the writers' rooms, and it has the feeling to me that Twitter had like 5-10 years ago, where it was like a lot of people like learning and talking about the industry. It's a lot of self-published authors on there too, but like there's a lot of ways to meet people and learn. And like Bethany said, like I kind of came up on Twitter. So that was how I found lots of other writers. It was how I found my current critique partners. I used to host a writing chat, like some of those probably still exist, but Clubhouse to me now has that feeling. And it can take a little time getting used to it, but it's interesting. So it's just another resource that's out there that is free.
Thank you for those resources. I kind of want to ask more questions, but I promised everyone that we would take the last half and, you know, reach out to our audience for questions. So if anyone out there has questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I'll be going through and reading some. I did see a question from Chris Larson saying, are you ever worried that a critique partner or beta reader might steal your work?
I'm not. I've never had that concern. First of all, like I said, I don't just send people whole novels as I'm trying to decide if we're going to be critique partners. But the other thing is, I don't think that it is as easy to literally rip somebody's work off as you think it is. You will have a digital record of the date that you first sent them that in the first place. If we were really getting to the point where we're talking about like having to go to court or something. I personally don't know a single person to whom that has ever happened. The most that I've ever really seen is a book coming out and then people showing from a previously published book, this looks too close, this seems plagiarized, not stealing from unpublished people. Ideas, now that's different. There's no such thing as a copyright on an idea, but I also don't have any concern over that because I know my voice and I know what I write. And if we both had similar ideas, which is going to happen because we're all tapped into the zeitgeist, okay? We're all in the same society. Hive mind is a thing, sorry. I understand that you're not going to execute it the same way I'm going to execute it. I'm not horribly concerned about that. And this is the way that I felt even when I was querying. I was never concerned with somebody stealing my work. We're all using our internet and our emails and stuff. So you have a record of sharing those things with people. But I would say, as Alexis also talked about, it is about trust, and it's a relationship that you build. It's not a relationship you should expect to just jump full bore into immediately. You want to make sure that there's a reason that you're in this relationship with your CPs, and you know at least enough about them to not have those kinds of concerns. If you ever do, just simply follow your gut. It's very easy to say no. You don't have to share your work with people. Whether people think you're being paranoid or not, it honestly is up to you. If you don't want to send people your work, don't send them your work. Understand that is going to be a deterrent to working on your craft and to getting the feedback and the criticism that you're going to need in order to build your skill set. But some people are genuinely uncomfortable with that and don't really want to share their work with anyone that's not their representative. So to each their own, but no, I don't have that concern.
Yeah, I think the trust piece is big. And also I don't think I've ever sent a full novel to someone who I didn't already know like really well, like I've known them for years, because asking somebody to critique a full novel is a ton of work. as well. And to ask that of someone, like, it's got to be someone who's who you trust to give you the feedback on the whole thing. And that where you feel comfortable even asking them that. Like, there have been times sometimes with my critique partners where when they do that and they like turn it around really fast, I'm like, here's an Amazon gift card because I really appreciate you. You like helped me out a lot. Because I just feel like it's such a big ask. And every single person that I finally, end up sending it to, it's usually like 4 people by the time I get around to that point. It's not a lot. Are people who I've now known for years, and like I know their families, their real names, things like that. So there is a level of trust there, and then they'll send me theirs as well.
Angelina, do you have anything you wanted to add to that? Okay. So we have a question from Maya Robinson. How do I find and gather an audience for my YA person of color dystopian novel? So I guess building an audience. How do you build an audience as, and a writer?
I guess that depends on whether you're a self-published writer or a traditionally published writer. I wouldn't say that I ever said, I'm going to go build an audience. Readers exist. And so a book that's being published and that's going to be marketed, in particular, like I said, my work is traditionally published. And so when we publish, we have marketing, we have sales, we have publicity, we have school libraries. And so I personally am not going out and trying to build my audience. I know that would be very, very different if I were self-publishing, which a lot of people are. And so I can't speak to that. So I guess I would just need more information about what someone's plans are if they were asking that question. I would even say for people who say, oh, be on social media and be engaging, I would have to tell you that realistically, I'm very much on social media, but I'm not engaging with most of my readers. Most of my, we start to believe that what happens on social media reflects the world. I would not be selling many books if I was only selling to my followers on Twitter or Instagram. That's not enough to actually, to actually build a career on. So again, I don't know who most of my readers are. I will never know who most of my readers are. That's not my job as a traditionally published author. That's my publisher's job.
My agent regularly tells me there's one thing I can control in this, and that's writing a great book. And that's actually a very obnoxious answer for Maya. And then actually there's a next question too. At what point in the writing process should we stop marketing? They're kind of the same thing, where it's getting to know your industry is not only putting out on social media, but reading what's happening in your industry, whether it's, because you've joined a writers organization or because you're on social media and you're following those writers who are in the same space you want to be in. But it's understanding what is the conversation happening within your particular genre. What are the needs of those readers? What are the writers doing? And there's no ABC to get to that. It is just with integrity, wanting to be part of that community, wanting to write in that community, wanting to have a message to that community, and with integrity, taking part in that community, and which is, again, very obnoxious, but there really is one thing you can control about gathering an audience, which is writing a great book. That's where you can spend a lot of it. And same thing when what point in the writing process should we start marketing? From Christy Stalder, I don't. But it's the marketing is really about connecting with people and connecting with, with integrity, connecting with the messaging from both the authors, the readers, and that you are that person. You are a reader, you are an author or a writer within that space. And, all of that kind of comes together as part of a natural part of that relationship, both building an audience and marketing. But in terms of what point in the marketing process should we start marketing, you want your website and your newsletter set up before you publish. I'm jumping ahead of questions, sorry.
Like Bethany said, the number of people who are following you on social media is hopefully just a small percentage of your actual readership. I mean, think, for everybody at home, think about the number of authors that you read and how many of them you actually go look for their social media, comment to them, like their stuff, sign up for their newsletter, look on their website. Like, maybe there's a handful. And maybe it's only because of something like what book is next in the series. They've got like 25 books in the series and I'm not sure, right? So it's a very small part of your readership that's actually engaging with you on social media. And I do think that there is a lot of pressure on authors to be active on social media, as if that is the thing that's going to turn the tide in your sales, and it's not. So I like social media because it's fun. So, and like Angelina and Bethany have said, there's community there. I'm on Instagram a lot because I love looking at fan art. So engage with it if you like it because it's fun, but don't think that it's going to have like the huge impact that we're told it has, because your time really is better spent on writing your next book. And like Angelina said, I think a newsletter is actually your best bet, because the people who are most interested in you are going to sign up for your newsletter. And if Facebook goes down, if Instagram goes down, if Twitter goes down, any of those things happen, you can't reach your platform anymore. You can't reach your audience there. Your newsletter, you're always going to have the emails because you can export that list. So you'll be able to reach people that way. And then those are the people who are going to be, kind of your biggest fans. They're the people who want to hear more from you. So you shouldn't feel bad about sending a newsletter occasionally. Like, don't send one every other day. We all get too much email anyway. But those are the people who want to know what's going on with you and, see a little bit more into your life. So if you are going to put the time into anything, I would say pick whatever platform is your favorite that you just like being on, and your newsletter.
That's very helpful. I think that a lot of people tend to think, maybe writers do all this marketing beforehand, and then they need to, they feel like, especially if they're, first time author and they're trying to self-publish it, or if they're looking to publish and, querying or something like that, they think, well, I have to do all this myself. So it's can be kind of overwhelming, but just telling them that you don't have to kind of worry about that, just do what you love doing, which is writing, and then let things, kind of lie. I think that's a great advice. We have another question from, Christina C. Booth, and she's going back to like the critique partners kind of line of thinking. At what point as you're drafting should you start searching for a critique partner? After the second draft, after the third draft, when do you think it would be a good idea to start searching for those partners?
I think that's kind of more up to you. How receptive you are and what you are trying to accomplish at what stage. I, as somebody who, I came from a vaudeville family, apparently. We performed a lot of stuff together. We read a lot of stuff aloud together. And so my writing has always been for public consumption. I've always been writing and then them reading it, writing and then them reading it. I mean, from the earliest, like as soon as I have a chapter, somebody's reading it. But that's me. That's not a lot of these questions. I don't know if people get the impression that there's a right way. For most of this stuff, there's not a right way. It's literally, what do you do? What do you like to do? How early do you like to have somebody involved? How early do your critique partners want to be involved? I now only have 1 or 2 readers because we're all published, and you can't always be like, okay, let me take time away from the million things I have to do for my work to read your whole novel right now. But for the 1 or 2 people that I'm still doing that with, we know I'm the way that as soon as I finish some words, I'm going to send it to you. And also, if you don't look at it, it doesn't really matter. Just sending it to a CP for me triggers something in my brain to be more editorial. And then I know that she's not going to send me anything that she feels like is rough. So it has to do with our personal level of comfort and at what point we are receptive and not destroyed by feedback. Because you certainly don't want to do it so early that it sort of kills your enthusiasm or your buzz. Some people just really need to ride the high of drafting and feel like they're doing great without anybody telling them they're not yet. So it really is up to you. A lot of this stuff is going to be what works best for you. You don't have to do it the way anybody else does it.
I love that Bethany said you don't have to do it the way anyone else does it. It's very important for people to embrace that and listen to their gut and all this. I've never worked with critique partners. I just never did. My first draft is like, I barely tell people even what I'm doing. I'm published 3 traditional books. My 4th one is with my editor now. And what I will do is in the revision process, if I've got specific questions, especially when it's like skill-based or culture-based, I will send it to people. I had an issue, then I sent it to a good friend of mine and have them read parts to check, or I will amend a book and put everything I need them to check for me and read that. I had a good friend who's experts check things for me a lot is what I'll have do, but I've never worked with a critique partner. So there really is this, what is your gut telling you is necessary for you, and leaning into that, learning from it. You're not always going to be right. It's not that I assume I'm right. I just know what I need to be able to get the words on the page in a way that makes people want to read them. I know what I need to do that. And then, people help me along the way. So, but there is no one way to do this. It really is trusting your gut about what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think also just being in a writing community and being open to building those kind of connections, so that when it does come up, you can maybe automatically think of someone. Like Angelina was saying, you might need like a reader for a certain element of your story, and you might think, okay, like I know of this person, I have known them for years and I trust them to at least just look at these parts. And then you just send them those chapters or those scenes. But it really does come from just being in the community. Like when I did find my critique partners, and this is something that I think you could do just so that you're clear on it. I had written down what I wanted out of a critique partner relationship. And it wasn't that I wanted someone to read everything as I was writing it or to read my whole book or anything like that. Like I wanted someone who knew my story as well as I did, just from us talking about it, and that I would do the same for them. Like, so I could say, okay, I'm stuck at this part, and they would already have the information about what my story was. And I actually did end up finding that group really through Twitter, where there were 4 of us, and we just started doing weekly video chats. It's been like at least 5 years now since we've been doing these every Friday. And we'll say, okay, I'm like working on the story, and we'll go, okay, well, what's happening with these characters now? Because we already know their names, we know their backstory, we know where they were. We'll say, did you get past that part that you were struggling with? Even though I haven't read a word of, my friend's piece, I just am aware of it. And then we can talk out those problems, because for me, that's actually just as helpful, if not more, I think, than having someone look at it and send me an edit letter. That doesn't help me as much. And also, once you start publishing, your editor becomes that person who you can let them know if you're stuck. They're the one who's they have to read your whole book and tell you how to fix it, right? And it doesn't matter if your critique partner says, I think you should do this, if your editor's like, no, I don't want you to do that. That's not what's going to sell. And we know, because we're in the publishing industry. So there's lots of different ways that you can go about it. I wouldn't push it. I know that some people will go out and just be like, hey, I'm looking for a critique partner. I was never comfortable doing that. If you are, rock on, maybe that will work out. My suggestion would just be in the community that you're in, whatever the writing community is, be building those relationships and connections, and then see what organically grows out of that, because that might be a better relationship than one where you're just like randomly meeting up with a stranger on the internet to send your words to. I hope that helps.
Those are good points. I never thought of it that way, Alexis, but yeah, randomly meeting up with a stranger, those are things your parents probably told you not to do. So at least my parents told me not to do, but that's kind of one way of seeing it, because sometimes you do have to you have to put yourself out there, but you have to make sure that you're comfortable with doing that. So when you do have critique partners, make sure that you are comfortable with the ones you have, that you feel safe with them, and that, that you feel like you're building a community. And I think that as writers, that's something we all look for. We are almost out of time, which I'm really upset about, but hey, we'll get through it. So I kind of want to ask one last question. And then if any of you have anything you want to say or add, or any advice or book recommendations, feel free to do so. But, we're NaNoWriMo, so we have pantsers, planners, and plantsers. So, you know, a planner, someone who plans and outlines everything, a pantser who just, you know, writes and hopes for the best without actually planning anything whatsoever. And then the planters who are somewhere in the middle, where they plan a little bit and then kind of like just go from there and write by the seat of their pants just a little bit. So if you had to describe yourself, which one would you be?
Yeah, I'm a planter. I've always been a planter. I understand pantsers more than I understand plotters, because at that point I just write the book. Like, what am I writing about writing the book? I don't know why people like homework. But so I am absolutely a planter. I come to the page once I know an opening line, and I will usually write a first chapter once I get to a certain point. The reason this is also very difficult to tell people about is because a ton of writing happens in my head. A lot of the writing process is not writing words down. It's actually, you know, stewing. It's actually like cooking in my brain. So by the time I start writing, I understand the voice, I have the voice, I know the premise, I know the concept and a character, and then I write an opening and see where it goes. I usually will know the very end stuff before that point too, but I have no idea like what the first act, you know, I have no idea how we're getting to the climax. I have no idea. And so I'll write the first chapter and then I will stop. I'll go back and read it. I will see what I have. And now I know more about the world and the story. And then I will usually plan out the next couple of chapters, let's say to the like middle of the first act or something. And then I will, but it's a lot of that. It's a starting, stopping, because I don't do that dirty first draft. I understand that people love to have their stereotypes and assumptions, but I don't write just to write. Like if it's ugly to me, I'm not going to keep going. So I'm not one of those people who will tell you like, just get it out. I can't get it out if it's a mess. I hate that. So I start and stop a lot. I read and then write again. I do a lot of reading my work as I'm writing it, to see that it's going somewhere, or at least that it's becoming a person. Some part of it has to be working, but it's very much like a right by the seat of my pants, stop, reflect, plan out, right past what I plotted, right by the seat of my pants, stop, go back, read everything, see what's happening. So it's very much like a stop, go type of thing.
Sorry, Angelina, go next. My throat.
I was just waiting. Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm a complete pantser. You know, I will take I try to take, if I can get a month before I start the draft, I will just research. So everything, you know, kind of the jobs and settings, and just gather as much information as I can to help me just to fill the brain. And then I start, and I essentially write I write 100 to 104,000 word books. I write, and it takes me 4 to 5 months for the first draft, because I agree with Bethany. It can't be horrifying. I can't just have words on the page. I have to have a sense of what's coming up, and that research does get, you know, peppered in, and it all has to have about a 75% to 80% sense of finish to it, so I can build on it. It's one word builds on the next one, builds on the next act, builds on the next, and I cannot do that if, you know, that it's definitely foundational building. I can't build anything on top if this is just shaky. So I do write a slow first draft, which is slow for romance, 4 to 5 months for the first draft, and then I do a quick reread, like in a day and a half, and then I lay it all out. At that point, then I'm charting themes. I'm charting story arcs. I'm looking at, you know, what are the things I'm peppering in that are essential thematically? Am I doing it enough? What's the rhythm of it? What's the, you know, like days? Like, do I have my days correct? And I literally print it all out, look at it, and then my revision is a pretty slow, you know, month and a half, really taking it apart and putting it together, revision, and then I'll do another quick one or two before I send it to my editor at the end. But it's a very much a pantsing process, and I love the romance genre because I do enjoy the tropes. I do enjoy the structure. This coat hanger, it's very plain, and that we get to dress up all kinds of varieties of wild ways, and I really love playing it with it that way. So it allows me that. But pantsing all the way.
Okay, well, I am definitely a plotter. Because I know we're at the end, I'm just going to give a resource. Becca Syme, Syme. She's an author, she's a strengths coach, whatever. She's got a bunch of books out about writing in the Quit series. They're called Dear Writer, You Need to Quit. And it's like things that you should quit doing or that you should like question about what you're supposed to be doing. She has an analogy about being a writer that I hope I explain this well because I'm trying to do it quickly. Let's compare writing a book to making a sandwich. Some authors can just get the bread, take the bread out, and start making a sandwich. I can't do that. Some other authors have to get their bread machine, and you got to get the flour, and you got to get the yeast and the water and whatever else it takes to make bread. I was not one of those people who made a sourdough starter last year, so I don't know. But all the things you have to do to make the bread, you got to put it in there, then you got to let it sit for 4 hours or whatever. Like, that's me. I have to put all of the pieces in and like think about it and write backstory scenes and an outline. And like, I have to figure out the whole story and my characters in my head and on paper first. Then I write the book very quickly. So my book that just came out last month, A Lot Like Adios, I spent months working on it, leading up to writing it. And then I got stuck at the end of Act 1. That was a real problem. But then when I wrote the rest of the book, I wrote it in 2 weeks. 50,000 words, also because I'd done NaNoWriMo so many times and I knew how to get myself to that point of knocking out my first draft. So I heard Theodora Taylor, who's also an author of lots of books, said the other day, I write to edit. And that's how I feel. I put all this work into the plotting, I knock out the first draft, and it's still got to be a good first draft. Like, I'm not like making errors and stuff. And I mostly stick to the outline. If it changes, sometimes I have to take a couple days, rewrite the rest of the outline, and then keep going from there. But for me, the magic happens in revisions, but I just have to get that first draft done. But I also have to do all of that plotting work first. So that's where a lot of the time is spent for me. Then I knock out the draft, and then I really shape it up in revisions. But I think regardless, like we have all described 3 different processes, and any author you talk to, any writer you talk to is going to have a completely different one. So you have to know your process. And I think it is useful to hear what other people do, because as you're still figuring it out or going, maybe there's some better way I can do this, you can learn from other people and try those things out. But if it doesn't work for you, you're not the problem. Just be like, that didn't work for me. That's not my process. And keep working until you figure out what does work for you. And also be aware that it might change.
Yeah, I was gonna say every single book I've written has been a different writing process. It's always been a version of planting. It's always been a very fast drafting period. But if somebody asks, do you write a synopsis? Do you write a queer? I'd be like, no, never. But as soon as I do something and it works, I will evangelize like I'll always do it that way. And I'm telling you, if you ever hear me do that, know that I'm a liar. It changes book to book, I promise.
It does. Yeah, that's right.
I used to be an early morning writer. I was like, 5 o'clock in the morning is the best time for me to write. I cannot wake up before 7:30 this year. So when do I write? Now I'm writing at night. I don't know what's happening. Who am I?
Yeah, I
spent 10 years saying I was a plotter. Yeah, I spent 10 years saying I'm a plotter, and then I stopped writing for 4 years. It's like,
yeah, it's so funny because everyone writes differently, and I would love to continue this conversation, but sadly we're out of time. And I just wanted to say thank you again to our amazing guests. For those of you who may not have heard of them before, now you know they're all amazing writers. I've actually read a book by each of these writers, so I tell you they're great. And if you want to learn more about them, check in our description box. We do have their social media links, as well as their website, so you can sign up for their newsletters. And don't forget, we are still in Double Up Nano, So if you have not gotten a chance to donate and win it, and then also a chance to win an awesome prize, be sure to do that. And good luck with Nano. And I wanted to just thank all of you once again for coming out. We really appreciate it.